Hello and welcome to the COVID-19 Crisis Revive the Health and Fitness Industry webinar. This is recorded on May 14th, 2020. My name is Marian Podolano, and I'm the founder of Fitness Professionals Alliance, a Europe Active accredited academy. As discussed in part one of the series, we're considering three aspects of this crisis. The first is financial consideration on how to keep the sector viable and what support does it need. Second, operational, and this is what this video is about, operational considerations. And last but not least, how does this current change impact the business model in our industry? So operational considerations are going to revolve around club environment adjustments, staffing, cleaning, group exercise and class operational standards, club attendance, and we're going to discuss capacity as well, and finally, operational hours. Without further ado, let's dive right in. Club environment. The first thing only, we have to control access. So we want to make sure that we don't have our entrance become a bottleneck. If you can have a lane for in and another one for out, or separate doors, that would be better. So you have a consistent flow of people going in and out with minimal interaction, okay? Second is we want to make sure that locker rooms, they can be accessible, but only if the physical distance can be maintained. So if you have a locker room where lockers are like floor to ceiling, then you would want to keep one every 3 lockers open so that there's at least 1.5 meters between participants, between clients. That being said, you want to make sure as well that if you don't have the space, then you close down the changing room altogether, okay? If you have like tiny boxes over each other and they're kind of condensed, there's no point. Just close the whole facility. Saunas, swimming pools, and steam rooms, closed. Proximity is an issue. And also, you might want to consider closing all or maybe some showers if you have enough to ensure social distancing. So maybe you have 6 showers. So from 1 to 6, 1, 3, and 5 will stay open. And the other, maybe 1, 3, and 6, right? Because they go from edge to edge maybe. And then the ones in between will be closed. But again, if you have like 2 on the right, 2 on the left, they're facing each other, and that's all the showers that you've got, then maybe you need to leave only 1 open or maybe close the whole thing altogether. Elevators. So quite a few clubs, especially if they're on multiple floors, have elevators. We need to keep them reserved for disabled people only. So if members want to use them, no. I suggest you keep the key with the reception and you put a sign on the actual elevator. Hair dryers, wetsuits, spin dryers, and other shared amenities, removed. Let's keep going. Now, if you're going to be selling food and drinks, keep them in a single container. And vending machines are advised. Once you put the vending machine in place, here's a tip. Put a poster saying that all the items within this vending machine have been disinfected for your safety, all right? Or for your comfort. And then make sure that the vending machine is cleaned as often as possible, as people will be touching the buttons and what have you. Now, a question was, how do we ensure social distancing when you've got treadmills that are stacked together? So there are a couple of things. One is you want to make sure between the rows of equipment you have enough space for everybody's safety. That should be in place already. You need at least 1.5 meters between each row of equipment. Some countries allow 1 meter. I would always recommend 1.5 meters because if somebody does fall off the treadmill, then even if their body is on the floor entirely almost, they wouldn't hit the equipment behind them. But between equipment from right to left, you would want to keep a distance of a couple of meters. So this is where you take one piece of equipment out of order while you maintain the next to it in order, working and so on and so forth. So it's kind of, yeah, alternating. You put these signs in an alternating fashion. Another option, as you've seen in a club in Singapore, is they've put plexiglass panels, vertical plexiglass panels, about 2 meters tall, from the ground to that level. So they're not on beams, and then the panel is on top. No, the panel goes from the floor to the ceiling, about 2 meters tall, so that each individual treadmill has its isolated space. Now, people are going to get into the classes and they're going to stand in a queue to do so. Make sure you put markings on the floor so that they don't overcrowd the entrance. Personal protection equipment. Make sure that you have a space for that is clearly marked, identified, and checked, so that your supply levels don't run too low, and understand how many items you still need to have in the club when you want to place an order. In other words, you have 100 items, the consumption level took it down to 20 items. Is that enough to cover the delivery period, which might be maybe a week? Is that enough to cover that period until your order comes through? Yes, no, maybe. So that you can place on that inventory checklist, order when levels reach this much, right? So we understand what orders need to be placed. Discuss that with your suppliers and keep an eye on it with your team. Office spacing. Again, people, we need to take care of our staff as well. So typically clubs do not put a lot of space in their layouts for offices. They're usually quite cramped. So you want to find ways to address that. Maybe you don't use the office space whatsoever, right? You can be on your laptop in a specific corner of the club and work from there. Just address that as well. Let's move on. No water fountains. Yeah, we're gonna keep those closed. Now, additional cleaning stations. I know that a lot of clubs have a significant amount of cleaning stations, but this period requires additional vigilance. So maybe we would need one every 30 to 50 square meters. So if your club is 500 square meters, then yes, you might need quite a few, but it depends on your layout. So if you have small areas that are, you know, kind of whirly and turly and what have you, or a very long layout, then you might need more stations. If you have a square layout, then you can do with fewer. Why? Because access is easier. So you could put them closer to the center of the studio, of the exercise area, so people can access them from the corners and from the middle of the floor. But make sure you have enough of them for people to access them easily. Because if they're not accessible, people have to walk quite a bit, and that will make it harder for them to adhere to your cleaning standards. With group class studios, now any studio that will stay open will stay open only if they have, and my advice would be, right, so you can maintain feasibility of your business. If they would have a peak capacity back in 2019 of at least 20 members. Why? Because today that peak capacity of 20 might be reduced to 10 to comply with social distancing rules. So if you have about 10 people in a room, that means that room is probably about 100 square meters, and there's quite a bit of equipment around. You would need at least 2 stations. Now, according to the CDC, you would want to have a 70% alcohol solution as a disinfectant, as your disinfectant. And you would want to consider using paper towel dispensers so people can use that to clean properly. The cleaning station, though, will have a soap dispenser and an alcohol solution dispenser together with their paper towels. Now, the soap dispenser would only apply if you have a sink next to that station, okay? If you don't have a sink next to that station for people to rinse properly, then no soap dispenser needed. What you would want is to keep the alcohol solution and the paper towel dispenser. If you have electronic touchless dispensers, even better, But if you don't, then that dispenser needs to be cleaned after each wipe. So people will need to wipe, right? Use that towel, and then that same towel with the solution, wipe the actual dispenser and the handle before binning, before putting in the bin. And of course, you will need a bin under each station. Air conditioning with separate air supply and exhaust. Now, here's the thing. A few clubs will not have this in their infrastructure. And here comes the question of what's allowed in each country. Where in the summertime, weather is going to be hot and you need ventilation. So I would say debate this with your government and find ways to move forward. In China, clubs that did not have access, that they didn't have a window to receive fresh air from outside and had proper air conditioning with fresh air, they did not get to open. So just be mindful that might be the case, all right? Contactless payments are encouraged. Speak to Visa, MasterCard, and American Express. Get your machines in. Now, post housekeeping, club access, payment, processing, class booking, and equipment usage signage to make sure that members are aware. And make sure that the signage is visible and easy to read. Make sure you use large, clear fonts, okay? These are some of the signs from some of our friends in the Nordic countries. And you can see here how clear and readable this sign is. And in their country, their policy is 1.5 meters between participants. Other countries want 2 meters between participants. Work with your government, find out what's what, and work within the bounds of the law. With the reception though, and this is incredible, you have to make sure that you take note, a lot of clubs install a plexiglass window with a small mouse hole for you to make payments. Other than that, or some of them actually place the payment machine right on the desk, so people can actually plug in their card, dial their payments, or contactless, which is preferred, pay for their membership. Now, again, we mentioned here keep the distance of 1.5 meters between people, and therefore some equipment pieces cannot be used. But this is an example of what a sign might say. If your club is 2 meters, because that's your country's policy, that's the distance that they require, then edit that, make sure that you comply with the local laws. There's an example of the glass curtain window. And here are some layouts from our friends at Basic Fit. Basic Fit have a membership base of 2.3 million members with over 800 clubs in 5 countries in Europe. And they are a registered EuropeActive facility, company, and they support the industry greatly. And they shared some of their best practices, which is pretty amazing to see. So here we have a layout of a club. I want you to note the orange circles. Those have about 2 meters diameter. So we see where they kind of overlap, but it's not so bad, right? However, once you see a red marked rectangle, that's a piece of equipment that cannot be used, right? And here's a little top tip. Bolt your equipment to the floor, especially in the free weights area, the benches, for instance. So people don't move them around and therefore create this situation where you'll have people in proximity, all right? So the red marked rectangles are for equipment that were placed out of order. If you look at the string of treadmills, you notice that out of 1, 2, 3, about half of them were kept in working order, 4 out of 8, right? So another example here, similar, and again, you'll see fewer of those red marks. You see in this club, they decided to close the changing room and they closed group lessons. Whether that was permanent or just in that particular scenario, I personally don't know. They might have changed that at the moment. But that just wanted to share with you guys different layouts and sizes so you can relate to your own facility. And here's a more spacious environment. All right, so again, out of order, very easy. They put just two bands across. And here we see how they mark the floor for each particular area. Again, is this something that you must do? Not really, but you would want to make sure you have enough space between equipment and that the equipment doesn't move around. That's very important. If they do move around, then members will get in closer together. Okay, club staff considerations. Make sure they understand what their new job description is, because yes, there's a new job description, and make sure that they sign it and you add it to their file, so we have clear terms and accountability during their shift. Next, make sure that they have the adequate personal protection equipment. Masks and gloves is what we're referring to at the moment, and make sure you have spares on hand. Here's a little tip: make sure that everybody mark their mask so we avoid accidental swaps. If the club provides the equipment, chances are it will be the same brand. So we don't want that confusion. You know, Johnny uses Mark's mask and vice versa. No good. However, when it comes to their gloves, a new pair each day before they go to when they start their work would be advisable. They might need to replace them because they might rip. And if they use a lot of the chemicals, right, like whatever cleaning materials, etc., some of those gloves might degrade. When you purchase gloves, make sure they're not tight. Okay, I made that mistake and it sucks. So you want to make sure you're a bit loose so that it's easy to grab things, right? And also the hand doesn't get as sweaty. All right. Let's move on. PTs and group fitness trainers will be in the club during training sessions only. Now, attendance is half an hour before the session or club opening time. But if they want to train, and by the way, once they finish the class, they should also leave as soon as possible, provided that the facility is left in a manner that it can be used for the next session, clean, etc. Staff can train, but they should book their sessions and their slots in the gym as well, so they don't train at the same time. Imagine if you have a club with 20 members of staff and half of those guys train in the middle of the day. In the past, that was not a big deal, but now with the restriction on how many people can be in a facility at the same time, you need to reconsider this benefit and maybe space them out. Maybe even have a schedule for staff training. I don't know, just make sure that you don't forget about this point. Train and practice how to deal with members, because some of them will not adhere to the club policies, and we have to find ways to deal with that. Discuss and practice on the worst case scenarios, right? All right, let's continue. Shift time should start 30 minutes before the club opening time and finish 30 minutes after the club closes to ensure that everything is cleaned and ready for operation for the next day. And we open earlier, why? To make sure that the club is ready for that day's operation. So it's an insurance policy over the previous day's shift. Housekeeping duties must be delegated to all members of staff. We do not want to burn out the housekeeping staff. It's unlikely that a lot of clubs can hire additional housekeeping staff. So we have to pitch in and we have to work together. It is the norm in a lot of European clubs, and I've seen this in Germany, I believe. Was it just Germany? I think there was another country, but Germany, where actually there were trainers on the floor cleaning the equipment, and that's just fine. There's no shame in it, guys. We have to make sure we support our clubs. We want our clubs to be open. We want to be able to work. So make sure that you support your housekeeping team, and we don't burn them out. As managers, be on the floor, interact, and keep your finger on your club's pulse. Okay? If in some countries Some countries operate with a loose quarantine guideline, meaning they advise you to stay indoors. But in others, we are in complete lockdown. If you're going to open your facility, people in Norway, clubs in Norway like SATS, once they close voluntarily and open voluntarily, they've requested their staff to stay indoors for 14 days. They've requested a 14-day quarantine. We would advise that you do the same, provided that you operate within your country's laws. Okay, it's just a measure to make sure you do your best in preventing any spread of this disease. Staff will wear masks and gloves and keep the appropriate distance from members and colleagues. And this will apply in classes and PT sessions. But those masks, guys, I gotta tell you, it's not easy to work wearing a mask. It's not easy to be active wearing a mask. So I would want to check on whether that mask needs to cover your entire face or maybe just your mouth, or if there are different kinds of masks for more active people so that the inflow and outflow of oxygen and CO2 can be can operate a little bit better. It's a pain having to work and coach with your mouth and nose covered. We communicate, we coach, right? It's very difficult to do that with these restrictions for a long period of time. So just keep that in mind and find ways to support your staff. Buy the right equipment, right? Buy the right masks. Make sure that they're comfortable. Group fitness classes, let's see what we've got here. All members bring their own exercise mat. If the class needs an exercise mat, bring your own exercise mat. They're cheap, so maybe coordinate with a local supply store and maybe do a deal for your members and make sure that maybe you retail some of those things in your club. But again, everybody must bring their own exercise mat if they want to access the club, because it will not be feasible for the club to clean so many mats so many times every single day, right? Members need to pitch in as well. There were some suggestions around bringing individual towels and using those. But imagine if a member uses a towel to wipe their face, put it on equipment, then okay, you clean the equipment, but that towel goes on another equipment, and maybe that equipment was not properly cleaned before. We don't know, but that towel stays with a member and goes from one place to the other. So within the club, so it doesn't help with preventing the contagiousness of COVID-19. So what we want to do instead is use paper towels to clean the equipment and place on equipment. If, for instance, you're going to lie down on a bench and you want to put a towel behind your head. Now, class duration, typically we do 60-minute slots. Perhaps we can reduce that to 45 minutes so that we can accommodate more classes on the timetable, because we need 30 minutes between classes to make sure that the groups of each class get in and get out of the location safely and without creating a bottleneck. But also we allow enough time for cleaning, wiping the floor, cleaning the equipment that was used. And of course, there shouldn't be any mats there because people bring their own mats, right? So maybe 45 minutes instead of 60 minutes might be better to make sure they get a good workout, because you still can get a great workout in 45 minutes, and make sure that you have 30 minutes for cleaning. So every 1 hour and 15 minutes, you have one class. This means we can still keep the 3 slots, after work in the evening, and 3 slots before work in the morning, right? 2 or 3, I would say, in the morning. So something to consider. Late class access will not be allowed under any circumstances. Self-explanatory. And when you design your timetable, I would encourage you to choose equipment-based classes. Dance classes, choreography-based classes, if they're not step, right? Step kind of keeps people on their own platform. But anything else that is floor-based, people will get close to each other, right? And so other than that, yoga, for instance, everybody has their own little space. Go ahead with those. Strength classes, barbell classes, kettlebell classes, etc. Now, before you run your timetable, run staff trials. People must understand the difference between how classes felt and what the new experience feels like, so they can relate that to members, right? So staff trial classes are a must in my view, and I strongly encourage you to hold them before you open your facility. A few other considerations. Now, remember the class duration timeline. If you run, what I want to add is if you run a multiple studios on your timetable, then what you would want is a staggered timetable, meaning in Studio A, you start classes at 5 p.m. In Studio B, you start classes at 5:30 p.m. So every half an hour or so, there is a class going on, right? This means members, if they pop into the club, they're not going to stick around waiting for long, which is good. And they can get in straight away. And secondly, if they want to do 2 classes in a row, it's going to be a lot more difficult because they have to literally wait for another half an hour to get into the next class, and they cannot jump in from class to class. All right. Moving on. Tools used are disinfected after each class and floor is mopped. Keep the studios well ventilated. Ensure alcohol and chemical fumes are evacuated. And this is where we need that half an hour. So priority number 1, class finished, clean. So there's enough time for any chemicals to leave. Some people are allergic, so we have to be mindful. Partner yoga, boxing classes, and other member contact classes should not be on the timetable. All right? But you want to do a shadow boxing class? Go for it, right? Just keep everybody separate, right? Keep them in their own particular location, or even have the bags distributed so that people, when they work on their own bag, they're within, quite far from others. Of course, the bags need to be cleaned properly after each class. And here's the thing: when it comes to these, to leather and vinyl equipment, padded equipment, using alcohol again and again and again is going to start to get it dry. So what I would advise you guys to do is to have like an oil-based solution that protects and nourishes the leather, or just oils and it just protects the surface so that it doesn't end up cracking. If it does, then your maintenance costs go through the roof, and that's no good. Set a capacity for each class around 50% of studio capacity and ensure social distance guidelines. Now again, social distance guidelines call for 2 meters in some countries, in others 1.5 meters. Make sure you abide by the rules in your particular country. Studio capacity, what we're referring to is quarter 4 of 2019 studio capacity. So if you had 20 people per class, now your set capacity is 10 people, okay? Members need to, if they display symptoms, they do not get into the club and their membership will be suspended. Make sure you put in place for your club a clear membership suspension policy that is for COVID-19, right? Symptoms or no symptoms, for instance, and whether there's pay or no pay during that suspension period. All members will wash their hands once entering the club, so make sure you have proper access to these basins and they're clearly marked. All members will wear face masks when accessing the toilet and changing rooms. And here's why I've added that in there. By the way, this is my input. I did not see this in any other document, but if you've got an operating changing room, then you know that people are going to get in closer proximity. So if they cannot keep the 2 meter distance, then you would want to maintain the mask on, right? Members must adhere to the club COVID-19 operational guidelines. If they don't, maybe suspend their membership, have some sort of consequence in place, maybe 3 strikes and you're out. But just make sure that everybody is aware. You could go as far as putting a 10-point document in place that every member signs the first day that they enter the club, right? So they understand the new club policies. Members must book their spot in group classes as per club policy. Do not leave it to first come, first served basis. People must book their attendance in classes. If they cannot, if you don't do that, then there's no way of knowing how many members are supposed to be in class. And you might end up with a crowd, yeah? We know that we have a limited capacity throughout the day. So let's make sure that people reduce the amount of time that they spend in the club. They're a lot more efficient. So once they come in, members will limit their training to 1 hour per day. Here's the thing. What I would recommend is that you close your cafes, okay? Any part where members can just sit down and chat, take it out of the layout, because that's an opportunity for them to linger in the club. And even though that's great to involve them in the club, etc., during these times, it just means your capacity, your overall number of attendance per day will drop, even though will be lower, even though your capacity is perhaps full, right? So just bear that in mind and pay attention to your layout and how the layout influences your members' behavior. Members will clean the equipment they've used with the supplied materials. Now look, some members are already in the habit of doing that in some clubs, in others not so much. And you might want to request that of your members, or depending on your club and its status and its value proposition, you might have staff doing that. Whichever way, after each use, we have to wipe down the equipment. And we're talking about the surfaces that the members touched, yes? We're not gonna, clean the stacks. We don't need that. The club will encourage contactless payment. So make sure you advertise it, post it, display it, and use those machines. So here are some examples of how studios will be spaced. Space within the studio will be allocated. All right, guys, let's move on to housekeeping. We must have a place for housekeeping supplies, list the inventory, and make sure that managers on duty check on that inventory regularly to maintain supplies. You maintain supplies, you maintain operation standards, and people will take you seriously because you're consistent. Use an approved list of chemicals as per your Ministry of Health recommendations or the WHO. Depending on your country, you will see some guidelines on what kind of chemicals are needed. Now, we understand soap, 100% to wash your hands. And when it comes to alcohol-based solutions, the CDC recommends 70%, or the EPA, so I think both, recommend the 70% alcohol solution to be used. Ensure all housekeeping staff use PPE, right? Ensure supplies are administered carefully, and estimate how much time they will last you for. This is a bit tough in the first few days, in the first week or two, but I would encourage you to look at this. A supply of X number of items lasts a week equals how many visits for that period? Maybe 1,000 visits, right? So if you see that your visit numbers are starting to rise, then understand that your consumption will increase, and therefore your orders need to start being a bit bigger. As your orders increase, reevaluate your space where you keep them and make sure that they're stored properly. Also look at your costs and find ways to optimize the utilization without compromising on the standards. Check with suppliers on a weekly basis to ensure stock lasts, as once open, there will be a surge in orders. You are not the only one opening the club, many other people are, so you want to make sure you get your order in play and delivery even early to overcome that initial hump, right? Plan well and be proactive. Train all staff on cleaning procedures, because everybody needs to support the housekeeping team and do the job. So appropriate cleaning, we will see some CDC recommendations below, and here's the 6-step EPA guide. You can find this on their website, and if you check coronavirus.gov. You'll find some information there as well. But beyond that, guys, here's what the CDC says. You want to prepare a bleach solution. Here's a recommendation to do just that. Feel free to freeze the video and read it. Now here he refers to the 70% alcohol solutions to disinfect touch screens and any flat surfaces. A few other recommendations here for personal protective equipment and hand hygiene. And of course, if any of these have occurred, blowing one's nose, coughing, sneezing, restroom use, etc., hands should be washed. And everybody understands the 20-second hand wash rule. Now, here's a list of items that you want to make sure you clean every single time you get the chance. And it should be several times a day, if not after every single use. Equipment displays, seats, handles. Feel free to freeze the video and go through this list as it's quite comprehensive. There we go. And I have a little message for you guys here. As a lot of trainers come back to work, and many of them will have to do probably more housekeeping duty than training duty, especially in the beginning, there might be the temptation to complain. And let's not forget, we were not in business. Now we are in business, and we got to do it with a smile, because if we don't do it with a smile, then members will not be encouraged to come in. Nobody would want to go to the club where staff go, oh, but I have to clean, oh, right? And drag their feet and so on. Do your job and do it well, and do it with a smile, even if it's not what you signed up for when you joined the club. But if we want clubs to stay in business for the foreseeable future, we must pitch in together and do so consistently. A few other housekeeping considerations to keep in mind. Reminder notice at the reception for all exercises to wash their hands before entering the premises. Yes? You will communicate that both through a document, but a poster will help as well. Before opening, go through a deep clean to ensure all surfaces are disinfected, and redo this deep cleaning as often as you want, especially if attendance is high. The guys at Will Fitness are really taking this to a whole new level, and they are cleaning the club every 2 hours. Now, what does cleaning the club mean? Well, I would assume the floor is cleaned and disinfected, and this is where the alcohol-based solution would come in handy. And all touch surfaces are clean. My concern is with the fumes and chemicals. So if you don't have fumes of these chemicals, if you do not have appropriate ventilation, then you want to really consider whether this is something that is safe, because you don't want to take care of one problem but create respiratory problems for your members, right? Make cleaning visible to members. Do not hide what you do, because that will make them feel more comfortable, right? Cleaning will make members feel more comfortable, so don't hide it. Overnight cleaning and disinfection has been adopted by Equinox and a few other clubs. My recommendation is that if you have a club that's larger than 500 square meters and you have significant attendance throughout the day, then that's something you might need to consider. But if you have a smaller club, then you could do the cleaning bit right after closing, right? And before the club opens the following day, so overnight it can get ventilated and fumes can exit. Make sure that you set a clear set of procedures and revisit them every week to optimize your consumption and how you utilize your manpower. Now, when you create this set of procedures, I would encourage you to follow the following. All right, first is we want to make sure we have a cleaning frequency matrix. What does this mean? For each area of the club, you have certain items there. What action must be taken for each item? Cleaned, disinfected, dusted, mopped, etc. How often does that need to be done, right? So this is the root guideline from which all other documents will spawn. Next, input data into a cleaning calendar. So what do we need to do for each day of the week? Maybe that calendar is weekly, right? You don't need to go through the entire calendar, but you need to understand what needs to happen each day in each facility, right? So it's like a to-do list for that day, for that facility, which then the person that is assigned to that facility for that particular time in their shift, they will be able to address, all right? So this is how you'll be distributing manpower on a specific, this is a Saturday, Sunday, Tuesday shift for one of the clubs. And last but not least, we must score how well we're doing, and the managers on duty should be doing that. If you do not have a manager on duty set up, I strongly recommend you put one in place. But of course, this depends on the size of your club. So if you don't have manager, then you are the one. Club operating hours. So a lot of people would go to work. If they do go to work, then you would want them to train before or after work. And therefore, we want to make sure that we cover those slots. There is another issue here. Some countries are still under lockdown. So as they ease their operating hours, and we see that they stretch the operating hours throughout the day, you will find yourself maybe with only a couple of hours of opening time in the morning and a couple of hours in the evening, and how to kind of manage that. Well, we're gonna do our best, but understand that a lot of people will want to come at that time. So make sure that we can accommodate them and maintain the guidelines, because that's when authorities will be looking very closely to make sure we sustain their guidelines. To figure out which times are best and which days are best, let's ask our members and see what they have to say, and based on their feedback, then plot appropriate operational times in your club's timetable. Staffing is next. Okay, make sure you set the rota for each week well ahead of time, and you communicate it clearly with all members of staff. And you have one placed in a very visible location, and one at the reception. Always keep one at the reception, so you can always refer back. I will add here, make sure you have the phone numbers for every single member of staff at reception as well, if you don't have that already. So you can easily keep track of, hey, is somebody late? Can they contact it, etc., without wasting time looking for contact details. The first 2 weeks are going to be a bit up and down. It depends on each club. So before you make any changes, exercise caution. Remember that when you open the club, if you did your homework, you had a lot of input from your clients. If you see a growing demand to make changes, then exercise caution. Maybe ask again the group members, some people that attend the club more often, your staff and their input, and then make changes, but give people notice. So don't change from one day to the next. Give them a couple of days notice so they can adjust their schedules. Everybody is kind of finding their feet now, so we don't want to create more stress. Operating times, any communication that you issue to members on any point, you have to repeat. And if you repeat it at 10 a.m. every morning, then stick to 10 a.m. every morning. Give them that information constantly, consistently, over a period over several days. That will help make sure that a lot of them understand what's going on. When your club is closing, warn people that you're about to close. Okay? Warn people that you're about to close, so that you have enough time to close the club, clean it, and get staff home before curfew. If that doesn't happen, then you might end up with either somebody arrested or the club not clean, or a member in the club overnight that you might have forgotten. It's not pretty at all. So, club capacity. I would advise you to accept and to expect about 50% of your average peak time capacity in Q4 of 2019, because we have to make sure that we stick to physical distancing guidelines or social distancing. and we also want to limit club and studio capacity. But even if we do that, it doesn't necessarily mean that we will experience a proportionate drop in daily club entries, because maybe now classes are not in a 3-hour slot, but maybe stretched over 4 or 5 hours. And some people can actually come to the club during those times. Make sure that you reassess how your club layout very carefully, and you can optimize it. Maybe certain pieces of equipment are used more than others. Maybe you want to swap them. Just optimize your operation to make sure you're getting the best that you can out of your capacity, out of your club. And I've put together here for you guys a pre-opening checklist: set operating times, rotas, timetables, communicate with staff and members, and make sure that you communicate repeatedly. Make sure that the club layout and the environment support social distancing guidelines as per your country's requirements, okay? Deep clean and disinfection before you open. Install posters and markings. And then you want to check phone lines, internet, power, plumbing, AC, water, telephones, anything that supports your infrastructure, elevators even, right? Generators, because you want to make sure you don't have any surprises. When you open, you want to be open, right? So maybe you need to speak to your internet company. Maybe there are some outstanding bills. Maybe you want to defer some of those. Just keep communicating, and make sure you are ready to open, and you don't face any interruptions from other reasons. And finally, train your staff. Get them to really be knowledgeable in every single area of your operation, so that they can work together and swap roles if need be. Some people might get sick. What happens if one of your team members gets the disease, COVID-19? Then everybody within the club needs to go into quarantine. That means the club will be closed again, right? So one thing that we advise you to do is to split your team into 2 teams and not have them swap roles, right? So if a member of the team operates in the afternoon, then he sticks to the afternoon. If somebody operates in the morning, then he sticks to the morning time. So that when one team needs to go into quarantine, and one person gets COVID-19, then that team gets into quarantine, and you can maintain operation with the other people. A few tips here, guys. If you're going to put equipment out of order, make sure that you alternate which equipment you're using every week or every 2 weeks, depending on your club utilization, so you don't put too much pressure on some equipment when others are on standby, okay? Communicate consistently. Guys, I cannot stress this enough. If people don't know, they won't know, and you won't get anywhere, all right? When full-time staff are not teaching, film, get online, market your club, keep everybody productive. And train. Keep people up to date with every single thing that you've got going on in the club. Any small successes, celebrate. Any milestones, celebrate. Keep them engaged. All right, guys, so here are our references for today. I've done my best to include as much information as I could, and many best practices from around the world. I hope I provided enough support. And all this, I'm sure that the question on everybody's mind is, when will clubs open in my country? You know, today I had a conversation with a person that I respect greatly. He operates a club over here in the country we operate in. And he said, you know, hey, if places of worship don't open, how can clubs? Especially when we are even more social. So again, I don't have the answer to that. And in some countries, it might be more so that clubs will be closed if places of worship are closed. In others, it might be the other way around. I don't know. But whichever way it is, you want to make sure that you are ready and that your team are trained, and you cannot be postponing this. You cannot say, I'm waiting for the government to tell me when to start. Look, the 2 meter or 1.5 meter distancing policy is going to apply to everybody. But when you open the doors and you're being told you can open from after tomorrow, What are you going to do? How are you going to get everything in place? Who are you going to talk to mark your floors? Who are you going to talk to make sure you get your contactless payment machine? Who are those contacts? I would suggest you list them down straight away so that you can activate this immediately, right? Get your infrastructure in play. And by the way, when we say team train, you might need to change your software, your club's software, where you input all of your billing, your classes, your booking. And if that is to be so, that needs time. Guys, that takes so much time. Just transferring the data, migrating the data from one course, from one to the other, so time consuming. It might not be the entire data. You might end up losing some data. You might even have to operate with both softwares at the same time. Maybe on some of them you bill and on the other ones you book, you know? So if that is so, you want to be sure you are ready, right? Because you cannot not have a booking software. Contact tracing will be the next plan of attack in most countries. And if you cannot provide data of which members attended which classes, then your government might shut you down. It's just the way it is. So be ready, and not only to get open, but then to stay open, okay? Put all of these contingency plans in order to keep serving your members and keep your staff safe. I want to finish this presentation by thanking everybody that has created all of the resources I've used to make this presentation. And finally, I would like to open your mind to one important aspect. Some of us believe that things will get back to normal, the way things were before COVID-19. I certainly hope so. I think all of us do. But will that be the case? We don't know. We have to be prepared for the worst case scenario and hope for the best case scenario. All that I've provided here, guys, are ideas and guidelines that have been compiled from resources all over the world. Some of them might work for you, some of them might not. Some of them your government will want to put in place, some of them not at all. I do not know which one that is. What I do know is that you have a business to run. And unless you want to get out of the health and fitness business, which very few of us do, then you want to find every single way possible to keep going. Because on the bright side, not everybody will. There will be people that will be leaving the health and fitness business. They just might not be able to survive through these changes. This means two things. One, it's unfortunate, but on the flip side, if you do persevere, you might get a bigger slice of the pie. So, stay open once you open, do your job, and keep your people trained, keep your people close, engage with your members, and keep moving, guys. I wish you all the best, and as usual, please feel free to reach out. Any way that I can help and support, I'm here for you guys. And that's pretty much it. Again, my name is Marian Podolanu from Fitness Professionals Alliance, a Europe Active accredited academy. I wish you all the best, and stay tuned for part 3, business model considerations. What does this entire COVID-19 situation mean for our business model as an industry? Have an amazing day and keep on going.